Five, four, three, two, one. Player one, ready, go!
Hello and welcome back to another interview with Player One. I'm, of course, your executive producer, Eleni, and very, very exciting interview we've got. You know, anyone who's a fan of the local gaming scene, the Australian gaming scene, we love supporting them, and I've got a great interview here. We have Lonely Shark. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm very good, very excited to chat with you about all things games.
Awesome.
For anyone listening and watching in who hasn't heard of you before, hasn't come across you, please feel free to introduce yourself.
My name, my Twitch name is Lonely Shark Melb, and I do variety horror. And yeah, don't like to just do one game. And generally, the people you find in that community are people that they like horror games, but they don't necessarily like playing them. So I kind of just do it for them, you know.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one thing I really love. I definitely am one of those people who loves watching horror games be played through. So I'm curious, is that something that when you got into streaming, you were always wanting to do, like stream horror games, or was it something that kind of just evolved through time?
It kind of just happened because when I started streaming, I was just doing Dead by Daylight. And I know I don't consider Dead by Daylight a horror game. It's, it's a multiplayer, like people versus people. There's no like AI there to kind of like scare you. But I sort of fell into it because, yeah, like I said, when I started, I was just playing with my friends. And then the pandemic happened, which was like 2020. And then I got NBN and I was like, hey, I can just stream. Why not? So then I ended up just streaming it and then sort of grew from there. And I was still doing Dead by Daylight. Then I decided I wanted to take like whatever this was a little more seriously, which meant I needed to actually have like something that wasn't just me playing with my friends. And I needed something that was sort of just like content that's actually entertaining for people to watch. And then someone made me, I forget what it was, someone made me play a horror game. And I was so scared playing it. And then from that point on, it sort of just became a thing where I was like, hey, it's actually really good content if I'm getting really, really scared.
Definitely.
And then just since then, just evolving it and trying to make it better and all that stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And you sort of touched on then, COVID potentially impacting, you getting into streaming, taking it a bit more seriously. I'd love to sort of hear you talk about your journey in getting into streaming and sort of the role it has in your life now.
Yeah, it takes up a lot of my life now. It's basically a second job at this point. And like the COVID thing, it was just like something to do. And then it, like I said, it slowly just became something that I'm like, hey, maybe I can actually do this. Because when I started, the chances of like becoming or getting to a point where like you could become like, financially stable or something, doing something like this is very, very slim. Even at where I'm at now, which I would consider like pretty high, I think even then it's still not enough to like to be able to live like kind of live on, especially in Melbourne. So I think that it's sort of like interesting the way that it all sort of came together because I've always had a passion in film. I've done like photography, music videos, I've done short films. But the thing is, with those roles, I never really had like one thing I wanted to do. I was like, I want to direct, I want to write, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to edit. I wanted to do everything. And then when I started streaming, I sort of started to fall in love with like the ability of like having this control and being able to like do different things on the camera or like have different effects happen or like different things and essentially make it into a show where I was doing everything. And it was just really fulfilling in that sense, I guess, especially during COVID where, I was just working from home. Whereas now I'm still sort of working from home, but, I'll work 9 to 5 and then I'll stream 5 to 11. And then I've got to find time to like do clips because if you're not like making clips for like TikTok or something, then it's just like nothing. And now I've started like trying to put out a YouTube video once a week. And I'm like, I don't have fun. Like I have fun, but I don't do anything anymore. Like I don't really like have a chance to go and do anything unless I made this full time. But then it's like, can I do that full time? But then you never really know unless you did it full time, because if I put all the effort that I was doing from my day job and put it into this, then would it be more viable? So
No, it definitely is a balancing act. And I think I like that you sort of touched on the internal struggle of making it like a full-time job, because I think, having spoken to other streamers, particularly ones based in Australia, I think that's something that a lot of people grapple with, that idea of, working full-time as another job and then basically having another full-time job being their streaming, but then having to weigh up if they can take the chance of potentially moving away from a stable income and really trying to break into the streaming scene. So I love that you mentioned that. One thing that I really loved that you spoke about was sort of your background in film and cinema. And we're sort of living in an age now where video games are so cinematic. The graphics are fantastic. You have horror games that can almost double as films. You look at like the supermassive games, for example. I'd love to get your take on sort of the evolution of games. Like, do you think that more cinematic games like supermassive, like Until Dawn, the way they play out like movies is sort of the way that horror should go for video games?
I don't know. I don't think so, because my issue with a lot of like, and I sort of call like the big horror games, like you've got like your I'm trying to think like just off the top of my head, like like I mean Alien Isolation is pretty scary. That was a big one. But like I'm thinking like Dying Light 2, for example, like that's a horror game. But is it really a horror game? Like when a game has like so much budget behind it, there's a lot of pressure from like the publishers to make that money back. So if you made something that was purely horror, not everyone's going to want to play that, whereas you need to inject like a bit of action or a bit of like, I like to call them like Hollywood horrors games, because they're made in a way that like it's got like a horror flavor to it, but you're not really scared playing it. It's more like action, or you're just killing as many zombies as you can. Like Back for Blood or something is it's not really scary. It's just kind of like just trying to, you're just killing zombies really. Whereas it's interesting because I think the future, particularly for like horror games, is in like indie developers, because indie developers, that you can make games with just like one or two people now, that like they're not like super technically impressive sometimes, but you don't need that with horror. It's sort of like less is more. Like the old horror films are the same way, like with Jaws, like less shark, it's more scary. That is a Hollywood film, but you know what I mean. Like Evil Dead is kind of like off the grid kind of horror that does really well. They're cheap to make and they make a lot of money, but they wouldn't, if they'd given them like millions of dollars to make, they wouldn't have made that money back. So that's why, a lot of Hollywood directors, when they start out, they'll do a horror film to start because it's really cheap to make and they make more money than what they spent on it, which then gives them the credentials to do something bigger in Hollywood for the next step, like Sam Raimi, for example, and sort of things like that. So I think like with the indie horror, like they have no restrictions, right? It's just, we want to make a horror game and we want it to be scary and this is our vision. And then because they're making it independently, they don't have like a publisher that's throwing money at them, that's also saying, okay, you need to make sure that, okay, we can't do that, we need to do this, and it needs to appeal to a wider audience so we can make this money back and make more money on top of that. So I think that's like the hardest thing about like video games and horror games, is you're never really going to get, it's really hard to get like a pure horror game like from a big publisher, because like I was reading about like Resident Evil 7, because that's like a pretty scary game. But like there was like some statistic that like not a lot of people ended up actually playing Resident Evil 7 because of the fact it was like too scary, which is why they sort of went back to Resident Evil 8, which was a little bit more actiony and like not as dark and all that stuff,
No, I am one of those people. I think I have played Resident Evil 7, but I put it off for like a solid year because I was like, especially after watching people play it in VR, that really put me off.
I mean, I was the same. I get really scared in horror games, like really scared. I can't play them by myself. It has to be on stream.
No, exactly. And like the first person element, I was like, no, I can't do this. But I did play. It's a great game.
It did well, but there was like some statistic where it's just like not a lot of people actually played it. Or like people would buy it, but not finish it. And
No, I was, like, I remember I started it and then I had to just like put it away for a couple days, and I think I ended up playing Breath of the Wild again because I just needed to cleanse my soul a little bit before
Yeah.
getting back into it.
Mhm.
But in terms of other video games, I know obviously you love horror, but are there any other sort of genres you love? What about, have you got any favorite games you dare mention to
Um,
the listeners?
I have like some guilty pleasures that I don't stream because it's not on brand for me. But I love playing Fortnite so much. It's just such a fun game. Like it's so easy to like, you know, uh diss Fortnite. Like it's fun to pick on. But when I actually started playing it, I was like, damn, this is it's really smooth, it's well made, it's fun to play. And it's just fun, you know what I mean? You can go in for like 30, like play like a 20-minute round and just be like, yeah, that was cool. Whereas like, I remember playing PUBG back like a while ago, and if you died, you'd be waiting like 40 minutes for your friend to run across a desert, just waiting for them to die so you could jump into the next round, and it doesn't have that. So it's nice, it was fun. I think, yeah, probably like that. I mean, I could quickly pull out my Steam, but I like Forewarned is great. I don't know if you know what Forewarned is. It's still a little horror-y, but it's a really good multiplayer game too. um but yeah, I mean, again, I don't really get a time to play games for myself anymore, which sucks.
And you would never stream Fortnite? You don't think it's too off brand for you?
I do have like an alt account where I can play Fortnite, but it's a bit more relaxed. Not everyone knows about it, and I like will edit clips on there. So if anyone comes in from my community and wants to like learn how to edit clips from their streams or something, they can just watch or ask questions while I edit them. But then I'll do some Fortnite on there too, just because why not?
I love that. I love that. And speaking about your community, something I really love is this push you have towards sort of positivity, and specifically, you mentioned this idea of like wholesome vibes, having
Yeah.
your OnlyFins, which I love. Do you mind sort of talking about the importance you place on making sure your community is a safe space?
Well, I mean, it can be hard because as soon as you start calling something like wholesome vibes or, something like that, it, I mean, anyone can say that. And that's sort of like a buzz thing at the moment. Like, oh, this is a wholesome place, or that's so wholesome. Like, I feel like the term wholesome's just lost so much meaning.
Yeah.
Um, so I just like to try and put like a big emphasis on just like showing appreciation where I can. But even I worry sometimes, am I saying things too much to the point where it's starting to become a script, or like it sounds like a script? So I just try and like all the time try and like find new ways to just show appreciation to the people that are there. And I always like to highlight like how nice everyone's been to each other, and like just point it out, and or say like, you guys have been so nice to each other. And I always bring it back to the fact that, I guess I don't think maybe I do have it in my thing. I don't really like to highlight the wholesomeness anymore in descriptions. I'd rather people just come in and decide for themselves, because I think ultimately if you go in somewhere and you're like, yeah, the vibes are good here, like we don't need to tell you, you know what I mean? Um so I think that if we I totally lost my train of thought now.
That's okay.
It's called streamer brain.
Yeah.
um it only gets worse with the years. But yeah, I kind of always bring it back to the fact that, the internet can be like a pretty toxic place, but like at least people know that if they come here, like it's going to be like a good place for them to come and like just hang out. I have people that come in that have like a lot of stuff going on, and generally like I don't really want people to be like sharing a lot of that stuff in the chat, because it can be triggering for other people in there too. But I like to let them know, like, you're welcome to hang out here with us and like just distract yourself, and you're around good people and all those kind of things. um it can be with like the whole thing. I know a lot of people and a lot of peers have said like, oh, like Lonely Shark's like nicest guy on Twitch and stuff like that. But I don't know, like maybe, but there's so many amazing people out there. All I believe is that if you sort of put an energy out into something, you sort of receive that energy back. So I feel like the community that has like become of this is sort of like giving back what I've been putting out. And I think you get that with so many streams. And I always let like people know, I'm like, it's good. Like if someone were to come into the stream, you can tell a lot by the streamer as well, by like the way that the chat is talking or talking to each other. So I think that's a really good indication.
No, absolutely. I love that. That's fantastic. I guess you did sort of touch on, that sometimes streaming and Twitch can be a negative place or it does breed some toxicity. I'm just curious, in your experience streaming, have you ever come across someone who's hopped on and maybe hasn't exactly fit the sort of community you're wanting to encourage, and what have you done about, the people who come on and maybe want to pick fights or throwing around things that aren't exactly, promoting good environments?
Well, at first, I always like to try and talk to people first. But also, if someone's been a bit trolly, I'll sometimes be a bit trolly back, but not to the point where it's like it's sort of toxic, because then that just gives a bad sort of example. I've been in some streams where someone in chat was being sort of like rude to the streamer, but the streamer was being rude back, and it went on for like an hour, and it was kind of like, what is this? Luckily, I have like, honestly, I reckon the best mods on Twitch. So what will generally happen is they're just always on top of it. They'll either like delete messages and go and whisper them straight away and just like let them know. And if they're really rude to them back, then they just ban them. Because ideally, a lot of people like to watch, and sometimes people are doing things while they're watching streams as well. So I find that if someone comes in, generally they're there to cause trouble. So my mods sort of know that if that's happening, I'm not really going to respond to it, because then I'm acknowledging them. In which part people that are just listening are going to hear like some kind of drama, and they're going to come and like, then it's just going to become a thing. So I'm like, just get rid of the thing, message them, see what's going on. If they're rude, block them. If they apologize, that's fine. And then we just move on. So then that way it's all sort of behind the scenes, and it just keeps things running smoothly. Because that's all they want, is just to like distract and then, get attention from you, things like that. But yeah, as soon as you sort of shut that down, they just disappear.
No, totally. I think that's the way to go, because as you said, I think a lot of the time it's people want a reaction. So then if you give them what they want, then it's kind of like, oh yay, like here we go.
Yeah. Sometimes it can be hard, because if you really like get back at them in a good way, it can be really good content for clips later, because people like to watch that stuff on TikTok and everything.
That is that is classic TikTok. You're definitely right. It's the little clips of like streamers clapping back at the trolls. That is very true. I guess I just want to sort of shift and focus more on the fact that you are a local streamer, Melbourne based. We're a Melbourne gaming radio show. So lovely to have you on.
Yes.
Represent. On that note, streaming is obviously a growing thing, particularly in Australia. So I would sort of love to hear if you've got any tips for any local Aussie streamers who have just started out wanting to get into streaming. Have you got any sort of wisdom that you can impart to anyone listening in?
I mean, do you have another hour? I would say like that, there's so many tips and tricks out there, and they're all over TikTok, they're all over YouTube, like 10 things you can do. So I feel like I don't really have anything that I could add, except like mindset. Like I think having a mindset, or the right mindset going into streaming, will definitely help with making or breaking it. Like for example, like I don't stream with a view account. I don't want to know how many people are watching me. And I always say this because it doesn't really matter how many people are watching you. If there's like 1, 2 people, 5 people there, and they're chatting with you every now and then, like those people have chosen to spend that time there with you. And if you are in that moment, any new people coming in they will feel that, you know what I mean? They will feel that it's a good time to be here. Because sometimes when, a lot of people stream with the view count on, you can see like they're always watching it. Maybe they're a bit upset it's a little lower than last time. But it's streaming. Like people have things on, people have lives. Not all the same people are going to be there all the time. So I think the more you can get into like a healthy mindset of just understanding things from that point of view, turning off a view count, and just like being in the moment with the people that are there while you're streaming, it'll definitely help with your growth, because you're essentially putting out what you would be putting out no matter how many people were there. And people can see that confidence and that energy. And then once you sort of get down like these sort of mindsets, like there's so many different kind of mindsets you have, but the most important one is just to like, you don't want to focus too much on like comparing yourself to others and things like that. But once you get that down and sort of figure out what you are and what you want to do, like again, it comes down to like, are you streaming as a hobby or do you want to do it as a career? Because if you're doing it as a hobby, like just have fun. If you want to do it for a career, like there are things you're going to have to do that are going to take up more time than just streaming, like pre-planning, like what you're going to do, what you're going to talk about, doing stuff after so you can promote yourself on other platforms, because no one's going to find you on Twitch just randomly. It's really, really hard. And I guess just realizing that I totally forgot my last point. Stream my brain. I'm sorry, but you see where I'm going there. It's very much a mindset thing. You don't don't get too caught up in the numbers, and don't think that you're having a bad like month or something, because it takes like 90 days or 3 months to really see growth on a scale. So if it's down slightly, like that's no big deal. Like that's just live streaming. And get presence on like other platforms like YouTube as well, because if you're putting content out on YouTube, it's got like evergreen stuff. You can earn ad rev. It's it's really great.
Lovely. Yeah. And I really think it's great. Yeah. Take a breath. That was fantastic. Well done. You got there. But I think it's great that you mentioned sort of the longevity of things. I think that's important, people needing to be persistent. One thing I'm always curious about, particularly when I chat to sort of Aussie streamers, within your community, do you find a difference between people who engage who are Australians versus, say, overseas? Do you notice any differences with the way they engage with you? Any little funny things like that?
Not really. I mean, there's so many. I think I probably know more Australian streamers than potentially viewers, and I'm friends with like so many Australian streamers now, which is cool. Like it's a very small community, and so it's interesting. I don't really see I guess like one thing is just when people come in, they're like, hey, I'm from Melbourne too. And I'm like, hey, because it's in my name. So they just know. Whereas when I go, or like there's someone who's not from Australia there, or I'm in someone else's chat that's American, they call me Mel B, like I'm some Spice Girl. So you can definitely tell when there's like an Aussie there, because they know it's Melbourne.
They get that Melb is short for Melbourne. Yes,
Yeah.
that would be a giveaway.
And then they're like, what have you moved to Sydney? I'm like, well, Melbourne boy at heart. I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like I said, Melbourne represent. That is fantastic though. In terms of sort of, the future of your brand, what you want to do with it, have you got any goals for the next 6 months, year, any sort of specific growth that you want to see, in your brand?
I do. It's a bit unclear at the moment. My overall idea for like Lonely Shark was it's something bigger than myself. So it's sort of like a housing thing at the moment, in terms of like it can house a whole bunch of things. Really dumb description right there. But I always see it as like being something bigger than myself. Sort of I don't know exactly what that means. But at the moment it is like my streaming thing, videos on YouTube and stuff like that. It used to be band photography and music videos, but now it's sort of moving in this direction. And originally my goal at the end of last year was to like hit partner, which is like a pretty big deal to do on Twitch. And then we sort of got there, and then we got the partner, and now I always said that like hitting partner was never the end goal, because like that's just like essentially making partner was my confirmation that I was like doing things right. So it was essentially the start of my content creation journey. I'm like, okay, I'm partner. I'm verified. That means like, okay, I'm legit. I essentially got the job of being a content creator in my mind.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people have the concept of getting partner as like the end game. And then you kind of just like keep doing the same thing. I want to try and keep evolving like every couple of months and doing different things, or else I'll get bored. People get bored. There's entertainment life cycles. Sometimes people are upset because a few months, or like 6 months later, they're not getting as many viewers as they were 6 months ago. But it's not on them. It's like people that watch content, like they need something else after a while. It's like why shows don't last forever, you know? So that's another mindset, by the way. It's like, don't think of, if people aren't watching you, it's because of you personally. It's just an entertainment brain thing.
No, absolutely. And, also talking about the future, with COVID, we had a lot of games being delayed. We've got a lot of big releases this year. Any games that are standing out this year for you? Anything that the minute it comes out, you'll be streaming it?
Yeah, they're all horror games though. So I think there's like Madison comes out at the end of the month, which looks really good. Indie dev. Actually, I did do a YouTube video of like the top 5 horrors I'm looking forward to, and it was like Madison, Choo Choo Charles, which looks really good, which is like I don't know if you know about that, but it's a train with spider legs, and it wants to eat you, I guess. And then you've got to get in another train on this open world and try and like kill Charles. But it looks really cool. Another indie dev one. And then there's just the Mortuary Assistant as well, is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. If you haven't heard of that, like there's a demo on Steam, but it's probably one of the scariest things I've ever played. And it scared me so much, and I had such a good time playing it that I cannot wait for the full release. I literally went to Patreon of the dev and like signed up for a year, because I'm like, I also really want to be in the credits. So that would be really cool.
Well, I
I'm looking
can't
forward
wait.
to that.
I can't wait to watch you play that, because it sounds horrifying and I won't be playing it,
Oh, it's
especially
terrifying.
a train with spider legs. It's a big no-no for me. Big no-no.
Yeah.
But I also love how you've sort of discussed indie devs. I think it's a really fantastic thing to mention, particularly in Australia, looking at the way the government has been really focusing on giving out grants to a lot of Aussie developers, things like that. Is that something that, through your streaming, you like to really pick out the indie games and support them? Is it something that's quite important to you?
Yeah, indie's just great. And like specifically for that reason, like all this big studio stuff is always going to have a formula that they think like, well, this is going to make us money. Even if it ends up being bad, they're still not going to take the risk. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, well, it's still going to sell. Whereas indie, it's just kind of like, oh, I just have this really cool idea and I want to do it. And I think when you play those kind of games, you're playing like someone's like sick idea, I guess, in a way, because you never really know what to expect. And I think that's part of the fun. Like I don't really look up like trailers or stuff for the game. So when I say like there's an indie horror game, and it's like got pretty good reviews, I'm like, all right, I have no idea what I'm getting into here. And the best thing about them is the graphics can be amazing, or they can be like really, really bad. But like it doesn't matter because it still works. Like I don't know if you've heard of Puppet Combo, like those games, they're very lo-fi 80s-esque, but they're still really good. And that I think that's just like the best part of it. Yeah.
No, I love that. And I mean, as a content creator yourself, would you ever consider getting into game development? And if yes, if you had a dream horror game to create, what would it look like?
I don't know. I'm not that talented. Not that talented. I just get scared. Like when I get scared, I scream like Homer Simpson. So it like that's my skill set right now. And I play games okay. And if there's a really hard puzzle, I'm like, okay, chat, I need your brains, because I cannot do this puzzle right now. So yeah, I don't think I could make a game. I couldn't even think of a good idea. Like originally, before I started streaming, I was working for 10 years on a animated series, which was sort of about zombies and stuff. But once the streaming stuff sort of took off, I was like, I can't, it's one or the other, and this one's going well. But yeah, I mean, who knows? Maybe I need to play another 200 horror games before I know what's missing. Actually, I know what's missing. There needs to be more like alien horror games that are like actually about like aliens on a farm or crop circles or something, because there's one coming out that's like about that, and it's so terrifying. And I'm like, why don't we see enough of like, oh, I'm in this farmhouse at night with a torch, and like you look out the window and you see like the crops move and maybe there's a hand or something. Like I find aliens just so scary because like they could be real. I don't know. But like in that situation of just like being in isolated on a farm at night and like weird stuff happening, and like that's so exciting to me. And I don't really see a lot of games like that.
I love it. You're a true horror fan because as you were describing that, I was like recoiling in fear, and you were like, "I'm so excited about that idea." That is
I'm
a
so
true.
excited. If I feel like chills, like I'm so excited. I'm like, oh, like because it makes me feel alive. I
No,
guess.
but 100%. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely like the farm setting is always a horrifying.
Yeah.
I like that idea of aliens. I think particularly, you've mentioned zombies a couple times. I think we're living in a gaming world where zombie content is almost constantly in the limelight.
Yeah. It's not even scary. It's just it's something to shoot at, essentially.
Oh, definitely. And I think you mentioned Dying Light 2, and I love both Dying Light games, but I did find the second game kind of turned down the horror dial a little bit, and it basically
Mm.
was sort of an action game. But is there a zombie game that you would say is probably your favorite or one you'd recommend?
I don't know. I see. I really like the kind of things that I like. They have to have like a lot of atmosphere. Um, like jump scares are fine, but it needs the atmosphere there with it, So you always kind of worried. So in terms of zombie stuff, I don't know if there's really been something that like has nailed that. I mean, I just want to say Resident Evil is just a classic, but in terms of like something that I've played recently, it's interesting. I don't think generally you don't really see a lot of indie games doing zombies that much, and if they do, it's not as scary. So I don't know. Maybe the zombie genre needs reviving.
It needs to be revived.
It
Yes.
needs to like they're all running now, and I think there was this whole idea of like running zombies are scary because it's just pure panic. But I don't know. There should be something scary, like you said with the farm setting. It's creepy, but I think it's creepy because you're all alone for like miles on a farm, but you don't feel like you're alone, and that's the scariest thing. It's like, well, I am alone, but my gut's telling me I'm not, and then your brain starts imagining things. So I think that's where the scariest stuff comes from, because you don't know,
No,
rather
definitely.
than, hey, look how scary this zombie is.
No,
It's got red
absolutely.
eyes.
I hope the devs are listening in and they're like, all right, we need to make an alien game based on a farm right now. I would watch you play that. I would not play that. That would be too much for me. But before we wrap up, any sort of final words, anything you'd love to say to your community, to anyone listening in?
Um, hello, OnlyFins. You guys are the best. Thank you for believing in me, and I can't wait to hang out on Friday for some Ash versus Evil Dead. That's
Amazing.
probably going to be so outdated by the time this goes out, but that's fine.
That's okay. I'll try my hardest. I will.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much, Lonely Shark, for taking the time to chat with me. You did just mention, a little shout out to your community, but for anyone who doesn't follow you and wants to really get into your work, where can they find you on the socials, on Twitch?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitch, Lonely Shark Melb, live every Monday, Tuesday, and Friday. So only 3 days a week, and also on YouTube, just Lonely Shark, I think. Working on stuff that I don't do on stream on there as well, and then just the usual like Twitter and stuff. But I mean, come find out if you like me first before you follow me on Twitter, because that would just be annoying for you.
Lovely. Well, and for anyone else listening in who wants to get some more Player One content, you can find us at Player One Sin, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Of course, we're on all the good podcasts, Omni, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. If you want to check out our radio show, we air every Monday night, 8 to 11 p.m. on sin.org.au. Everyone listening in, I hope you've had a lovely evening. And this is Eleni saying farewell from Player One.